Okay, go with me for a second. There's been a lot of movies and TV shows about how technology is pushing us towards a dystopian future. But I've never seen this conversation be as loud as it is with this new season of Black Mirror. Something's different. Today, why has this new season of Black Mirror hit a nerve? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so the thing that put Black Mirror on the map, the thing that made it popular is that it made these, frankly, terrifying predictions of how technology might shape our future. I guess maybe it's more accurate to say how technology is going to create just like nightmare scenarios for you and me. It's all from the mind of Charlie Brooker, who's a creator, writer, and I guess some kind of doom prophet of Black Mirror. But Black Mirror is now back with a new season, the 6th season. And what's fun about this season is that the first couple of episodes take aim at Netflix itself. It deals with how streaming giants are able to exploit privacy, but also trauma from artists and audiences. TV critic Kathryn VanArendonk and culture critic Amil Niazi are here. They're going to unpack these episodes. Amil, Kathryn, what's good? Welcome to Commotion.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
Listen, we should say right now, there's gonna be spoilers in this conversation. This is not a spoiler-free zone. We're gonna spoil these episodes because there's so much to talk about. But I'm gonna set up the first episode. It stars Annie Murphy, who you might know from Schitt's Creek. On this show, she plays Joan. She's had a long day. Okay. Joan has fired someone at work. She got a text from her ex. She hates her fiance's bland cooking. She's trying to sort of just deal with it. Then Joan turns on the TV and she finds there's a new show on the streaming service called Joan is Awful. It is a near exact play-by-play of her day, but there's a few things that are kind of exaggerated to portray Joan as a villain. On top of that, Joan is played by an AI version of Salma Hayek. So Joan then goes to a lawyer and asks, hey, how is this legal at all? Here's that scene.
The show is using my life. It's my name, it's my career, it's me. They're using me, so...
And you assign them the right to exploit all of that.
What? When?
Terms and conditions.
I have never seen this before.
You have. You just haven't seen it printed out before. All of that would have popped up on your phone or whatever when you first signed up to Streamberry, and you clicked accept.
But, I mean, I had no... How was I supposed to know this?
I know, but you did accept it, and so they're in the clear.
No. They can't do this to me.
There are only so many ways for me to tell you that they absolutely can.
You heard the words Streamberry there, Kathryn. That's the streamer in these episodes. It's called Streamberry. That's the one that's putting on these things. It's not even, they're not going through any effort whatsoever to hide the fact that it's Netflix. It's the same font as Netflix. The same music pops up as like when you start a show on Netflix. Can you just walk us through the levels of exploitation going on here in Joan is Awful?
Right. So the idea is that Joan is a Streamberry subscriber. She now sits down. She opens up. It's not just the like font and the music. It's like you see her open up the identical interface, right? Like all of the cards, everything looks perfect. One of the first cards you see is for a show called Loch Henry, which is actually the second episode of Black Mirror. Like this is Netflix, right? Yeah. And so she is then being, her life has been harvested for the purposes of this entertainment. She doesn't really understand how. Then we understand that Salma Hayek's AI image is what is being used to create this show. Salma Hayek then gets the real life, quote unquote, Salma Hayek gets extremely upset about this because Joan decides to attempt to excavate herself from this process by being unfilmable, by like doing whatever she can to create the most disgusting scenarios possible so that Salma Hayek would never agree to it. But it doesn't matter because Salma Hayek is similarly being exploited, and they are then all trying to extricate themselves from a terms and conditions that is just your life has been taken, right?
And it's many, many levels deep. Somewhere in there's a Michael Cera, return. Yes. I haven't seen Michael Cera in so long. I was so excited about this. Emil, it's been a really divisive episode. There are a lot of people who are like, you know what, Joan is Awful, top 3 Black Mirror episodes. And then there's lots of people who say, hey, Joan is awful. Bottom 3. Where are you at?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's true that anyone said it's in their top 3, but I would love to see that, talk to that person. For me, it is not one of the worst Black Mirror episodes ever, but certainly already in this season, it's not the best. I think the premise is very heavy-handed. I think Lock Henry, which I know we're going to talk about the second episode in a minute, but sort of has a similar bone of contention to pick with Netflix, and it does it in a much smarter, more nuanced way. I think that what happened with Joan is Awful is that the timing of the writer's strike, this, very heated discussion we're having across the media about AI, ChatGPT, what role it's going to play, how it's going to displace people, and whether or not that content is even good, and if we emotionally react to it or not. It happened to hit in a moment where we're really ready for that conversation. And so that's why I think we're even talking about it as much at all, because frankly, it is not, to me, a standout and would not ever normally be an episode I would even want to talk about.
There is a certain almost hokiness to the premise, as Amil is pointing out there, Kathryn, but the timeliness of it is the thing that makes Black Mirror work in general, right? The idea that the Black Mirror is so prophetic about these things, and it just so happens to, as Amil mentioned, gather up all of this nebula of conversation that we've been having about AI, about writers, and then hit at exactly this moment. Do you think that is why we're talking about this episode so much?
I mean, yes, I do think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, if ChatGPT had not come to the moment that it has in the last several months, I think probably this would not feel quite as relevant as it does.
Yeah.
As far as hokiness goes, I certainly see that. I find almost all Black Mirror hokey on some level. It's like a charge that's sort of hard to level at this versus any other episode. And I do think it is not a show that it is not a show I turn to for subtlety, right? This is not a show that I'm looking to say what are some very the complexity of human, there are some episodes that I think have, sometimes in spite of themselves, managed to find those moments. I think San Junipero is often considered one that has this kind of character development that feels unusually tender and considered.
Yeah.
But as far as Black Mirror is a show with a big hammer, and it hits big nails. And so in that sense, this episode feels like it is as obvious as it was deliberately trying to be, and if you have an allergy to that, I think, yes, of course it's just going to feel, no, it's not going to work. But I do think as a TV viewing public, we respond pretty well to big hammers and big nails. It does seem to be achieving its goal in that respect.
Well, I was going to say, Amil, to me, the thing that makes this episode work so well is that I would say Black Mirror as a show is a little bit oriented towards the near future, sort of, this near future sci-fi. This isn't happening in your life right now. This is happening in your life, let's say 5-6 years from now. This was the first episode that I watched of Black Mirror and went, they don't mean this to be in the near future. They mean this in the right now. They mean this in the sort of most immediate conversation. Do you see that as a direction that works for Black Mirror, or is it actually better when it's just a little bit more forward thinking?
Honestly, I just think that Charlie Brooker's tired of making this show, and he's running out of material, and he's sort of scrambling at this point. When he's been effective in San Junipero, in White Bear, in the USS Callister, he's been so effective at not necessarily predicting the future or, having some incredible analyses of where we're going, but just at connecting with, a hidden fear or a very obvious fear, and just telling a great story around that fear. Yeah. And I think it's clear from this slate of episodes in particular that, there's only so many stories you can nail, and he's nailed a lot of them. And I think that this should be the last season of Black Mirror.
Wow. Amil is ready for Black Mirror to just hang it up. That's fair. That's totally reasonable.
Black Mirror is ready for Black Mirror.
Kathryn, you looks like you're going to say something there.
Yeah. I mean, I think actually some of the most interesting stuff in this season is the way that it makes you sit with like is the argument to cancel your Netflix account, right? Like, and which there is a really unresolvable tension inside that, because if the argument is that you should be canceling your Netflix account, like, of course you're not going to. You're a Black Mirror fan and you want to watch Netflix. Like, it is essentially a bad faith kind of argument to be making, unless it's like we're all trapped in this together and there is no escape. Like, there is an escape. We could all just not watch Netflix anymore. But it does feel like that is reflected. The unresolvability of that is reflected in my least favorite part of the episode, which is the very end, where the decision is to just, there's like a giant MacGuffin cube that she just smashes.
The
and then the whole thing
computer,
breaks.
I believe it's called.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah,
excuse me.
It has a name, Kathryn. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like they sneak into the Streamberry headquarters. They get like a hammer, and they just smash the cube to bits, and then the whole thing is done. And would that it were so easy to extricate any of us from this particular,
from the computer, from the Netflix reality. Yes. Right.
And it feels like a bit of a shrug. To say, what if we could just smash at the end? Because of course we can't. And short of something, I don't want to say more hopeful or more dire or more at least considered about like what the answer is, which has always been my problem with Black Mirror. It's like, oh my God, these problems. And they're like, yeah, okay, now what? It feels like the episode is presenting some really fascinating questions and then being like, best of luck, bye, But
I do think that is Black Mirror at its best, right? Like, it's not a show that is trying to answer questions. It's trying to say, hey, if you took sort of all of this stuff and sort of put it in just one bucket and thought about it, wouldn't you be worried? And I guess like you can go after every episode, you go, yeah, I would be a little bit worried. Thank you, Black Mirror, for making me a little bit worried about this. But I don't think it's fundamentally trying to go to the place of giving you some kind of answer, right? Is that where you stand on this? Yeah.
That's 100% correct. But that doesn't mean that I don't then end those episodes being like, okay, I'm worried. Thanks.
That's fair. Okay, if you're just joining us now, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. I'm talking to Amil Niazi and Kathryn VanArendonk about this new season of Black Mirror. I want to turn very quickly to the second episode now, which is called Lock Henry. This one's about true crime, right? It follows a couple, two young filmmakers named Davis and Pia. They want to make their first documentary, and after a lot of debate, they decide to tell the story of a small-town serial killer. But it turns out to be personal for Davis because his father was a police officer who was shot by that killer. And Amil, I just want to say true crime is the sort of big hit for Netflix. It makes sense that Black Mirror would take this on. What do you think of the episode? What do you think the episode is trying to say about the genre?
I thought it was a really strong episode, and actually my favorite of this season. And, probably because it's really personal for me as well. Like many, many people, I have enjoyed feels like a really weird word for it, but I watched the genre and probably too much of it. And I think that, the ethical questions around how they exploit not just these stories, but the people at the heart of them, the places at the heart of them. It's the sort of the episode is sort of like buoyed by this, small town pub owner who wants them to tell this story so that tourists will come drawn by this like horrible, sick, sad tale of murder and come to and drink in his pub and save the town. And so it does that like the performances are great. The storytelling is really strong, and the ending is very, very bleak, but I think it immediately makes you feel, I think, what you're supposed to feel, which is ethically compromised and sort of asking yourself, like, what am I getting out of these shows that I watch? Why am I watching them? Who is being hurt by my watching them? And so I just thought, a similar sort of message with Joan is Awful, but done in the way that Black Mirror excels, which is with nuance, with heart, with that emotional kind of center. And so I really liked Lock Henry.
I wish we could talk about Loch Henry for like 10 more minutes because I was really drawn to that episode, particularly drawn to the way that Davis, for the last maybe 20 minutes of the episode, doesn't say a word. He's just kind of in this place of trauma. But we don't have that kind of time. So Kathryn, Amil, I just want to say thank you for being here. I wish we could keep talking about the show, honestly, forever, just because that's what Black Mirror is really good at, is giving us stuff to talk about. And I appreciate you guys being here to talk through it. Kathryn, Amil, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. Amil Niazi is a culture critic and columnist at The Cut. Kathryn VanArendonk is a TV critic at Vulture. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, when Mirvish Productions said he was bringing Harry Potter and the Cursed Child to Canadian audiences, there was a ton of excitement, and you can understand why, right? It's this epic play that was getting all these great reviews in other countries, and it's based on hugely popular characters. But here's the thing. It only opened last year in Toronto, and it's set to close this coming weekend. Mirvish said 13 months is a record-breaking run for Canada, but it might have gone even longer if it weren't for the pandemic. So I talked to my pal Glenn Sumi. He's a longtime theater critic and journalist. I started by asking him how he reacted to the news that the show was closing.
I gotta say, my reaction was mixed. I mean, it did run for 13 months. And as you pointed out, it broke the record for the longest running professional play in Canadian history. So, all of that is really good news. But I think after the buildup, after the huge investment by Mirvish Productions, after all the awards, it literally swept the Tony Awards on Broadway and the Oliviers in London. It has got to be a letdown, even though, if we are going to be honest, it was not a surprise for people who follow theater. I mean, I remember just maybe 4 or 5 months ago seeing 2-for-1 ticket deals for the show. And when you see that, you know that a show might be in trouble.
Listen, let's talk about the show itself. You saw the play. How did you feel about the Toronto version of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child?
I really liked it. I mean, I thought the story was fun and inventive. And I think for listeners who don't know, it's a sequel to the Harry Potter books and the movies. And it sort of picks up right after the epilogue. So it basically follows the next generation of kids at Hogwarts. Harry's boy Albus and Draco Malfoy's son, what's his name? Scorpius. But yeah, I know.
Yes.
But what wowed me, and I think every audience member who saw it, was the special effects. I mean, in film we are so used to seeing CGI and green screen effects and Tom Cruise doing his own stunts and everything, but that usually doesn't happen at the theater, which is right in front of us. And still have no idea how they did certain things in the show. I mean, there are a couple of moments. It seems like the air in front of you shimmers and vibrates. There are creatures who sort of fly up into and around the theater, and there don't seem to be any wires or people. So, I go to, maybe 150 shows a year, and it's very rare that I hear gasps from the audience. And there were definitely gasps at Harry Potter.
Okay, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I saw it too, and those are the things that stick out to me. I am still wondering how they got people through a telephone booth. I don't know how they did that. It's again, the Dementor scene, which kind of comes right before the intermission. Yeah. I screamed in my seat, and I don't like. I'm not new to go into theaters. Yeah. Like, it's not. But I was sort of. The story was fine. I didn't love the story particularly, but there was something so remarkable about the fact that there were people there. Then suddenly they went through a telephone booth. I'm like, how'd they do it? Seriously, Glenn, how'd they do it? I'm not letting 100%. You off this call until you tell me how they did it. Do you know how they did it?
You know what? It cost a lot of money. That's how they did it.
Okay, let's talk about the money. What did Mirvish spend in order to actually put this show on?
Yeah, I mean, we got to talk about the bottom line, which is why this isn't running anymore after this weekend. Apparently, any production of this show costs approximately $25 million to put on. That's set design, that's costumes, that's training for all of those amazing stunts and the magic. And on top of that, Mirvish invested another $5 million in renovating and retrofitting the theater just for that show. I mean, one of the really sad parts of this story, I think, is the original version of Cursed Child was in 2 separate shows. And because of the pandemic, the creators of the show condensed it into, the one show version that you and I both saw.
It was initially 6 hours. You had to go see it over 2 nights.
Yeah. So Toronto got the one show version.
Yeah.
So what that meant was that any potential profit were essentially halved.
So what happened? You've got millions of dollars spent on newly renovating this theater. What happens to that newly renovated theater now that the show is coming to an end?
Yeah, another sad story. I mean, for the time being, it is empty. David Mirvish gave an interview and he said it generally takes about a year to find something appropriate to put into a theater when a show closes before you've planned it to close. So, let's hope they fill it with something soon. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the changes that they made to the actual theater itself?
Yeah, I mean, they had to create this whole big gold dome at the top. They changed the seating too. I think the original capacity at the Ed Mirvish Theater was 2,300, and they shrunk the seating area because of what they needed for the effects. They shrunk 2,300 seats to 1,600 seats, which is gonna, I know, it's going to cut into your bottom line as well.
We should also talk about the fact that, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, is one of the people behind the play. Like she's one of the people who wrote the thing. She's faced widespread criticism over the years by a lot of fans who see some of her reviews as transphobic. She says, that she's misunderstood. Do you think the controversy that's been surrounding J.K. Rowling has affected in any kind of way the support that Harry Potter and the Cursed Child gets?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really hard to gauge, but what I can say is it didn't help. I mean, there may have been thousands, if not tens of thousands of Potter fans who actively avoided the show because of the controversy. And again, another sad thing is that Mirvish Productions began negotiations for the show way back in 2017, I think.
Oh, wow.
Years before Rowling made those statements. So they could not have known that this was coming up.
So the reality is the show is still going strong in New York. It's still going strong in London. It's been staged in Melbourne for the past 4 years. What is the challenge? What's going on in Canada that there's such a big challenge in keeping a big show like this running here?
I really think the pandemic got people used to staying at home and binging TV. I think that theater producers need to find something that is unique and has enough buzz for people to make that trek into the city the way they do for, a big concert or a ball game.
Yeah. You've written before about how financially challenging it can be to be employed in theater, like to work in any kind of capacity in theater. What differences does it make to a cast and crew, do you think, to have a longer show run like Harry Potter and the Cursed Child?
Yeah, I mean, a while ago we talked about, the Phantom of the Opera closing after 35 years. And I remember reading a story about how the musicians in that orchestra, once they realized they were in a long-running show, something that was going to play a couple of years or longer, they suddenly felt free to do things that they wouldn't normally do if they were working just contract to contract. So they took out mortgages, they sent kids to university, they took vacations. I think they basically had some sort of security in a business that is notoriously insecure and precarious. So I'm so glad that this, huge cast and crew, I think there are 35 people in the cast and 60 crew members and backstage and everything.
Wow.
I'm so glad that they didn't have to worry about, where their paycheck was coming for at least 13 months. That is so rare these days. When I did that article, I learned that, most theater contracts in Toronto are like 6 or 7 weeks, and you can go months between them. So I hope a longer running show comes along to fulfill that space.
Love that conversation with Glenn. That's Glenn Sumi, a theater critic and journalist in Toronto. You can check out his website at goaheadsumi.com. The cast of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child take their final bows at the Ed Mirvish Theater this Sunday. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I hope you've had a good time today. I'm going to be here tomorrow. We're going to talk about how music venues are coping with the fact that Gen Zs are drinking less. Really fascinating conversation. Really looking forward to that. You know what? If you're going to be here, I'll be here. I'll see you then.